Welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. We're here to chat about humane leadership in a way that's real and relatable, tackling work-life challenges and offering practical advice to navigate tough decisions. Whether you're leading a team or navigating your own career, we've got you covered. I'm Chris Hollerking, a Fortune 100 IT leader, and with me is Roberto Torres, a startup engineering leader. We'll dive into real world stuff, share experiences, and offer guidance on leading with compassion while keeping your career on track. Today, we'll discuss how a humane leader discusses the Venezuela situation and other hot political topics. Roberto, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2026.
Happy New Year to you too, Chris. Thank you.
And boy, a lot of things happened while we were on break. President Trump decided to do some very political things and arrest the president of Venezuela, which is a big political thing. And in general, in humane leadership, I've always been very anti-discussing anything to do with politics. Shouldn't discuss politics at work. However, as I age and as I see our world getting more divisive, I've been leaning towards we need to start getting the world closer together versus farther apart. And we have global teams. We may have team members that are in Venezuela or other countries, around the world where we might be in conflict with each other at a government level, but we're collaborating with each other as a worker level. And so I think as humane leaders, maybe my stance on no politics is wrong, and some politics will help maybe make the world a better place. What do you think?
Well, I think it is a trendy topic right now, talking about Venezuela, about Nicolas Maduro. Um, but yes, I think it is a touchy subject, touchy topic to discuss because politics in different countries are totally different. Even though there might be countries like Mexico and United States, which we share a border, but we are different and we have a different politics. And discussing with team members politics of their country, if their company has um, team members that are in different countries, is something that could make someone to have a different mindset of what we think versus the one who is living in that specific country. So I think, yes, it's something that we tend to avoid, but in this particular thing that we are living today, it might be something that we might not understand, but we might talk with the team members.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, as a humane leader, would not be setting up a meeting agenda to
Oh,
talk
yeah.
politics, right? What I'm talking about is sometimes we are social on our Zoom calls with our global team, and it's an opportunity for us. So me as the American, ignorant of world politics, right? That's typical American. We need to, as humane leaders, open our eyes and ears and hear the perspectives of these other people in other countries to understand, like, how do they perceive America? How do they perceive our actions? So with this Venezuela situation, I have some strong feelings about two aspects of it. On the one hand, I've had family members impacted by fentanyl. And so I'm like, we got to do something. I don't know what it is. We got to do something. We got to change things. On the other hand, I know that, it to me, with the legal system, it seems wrong to be destroying and blowing up these drug boats when we don't know absolutely for sure they're drugs. I mean, we've got the cameras and it's bales and there's no fishing poles. But in my mind, I was raised to believe that everybody gets their day in court and nobody is judge and jury and executioner all at once, and they're blowing up these boats. So I want to stop bad, illegal things that are hurting people, but I also know that maybe the people that are driving the boat, maybe their families were kidnapped. They're being forced to drive the boat, and us blowing it up is bad. I don't know how else to start educating the world, everybody in the world, right? Unless we start to talk about some of these topics with people that we know in other countries. And unfortunately, I don't have very many international friends. You're one. I have a few others, but I don't have much of an opportunity to talk and learn about their perspectives. And I think as a humane leader, my anti no politics whatsoever rule needs to be adjusted, because I think only through having somewhat guarded conversations, right? Because we're still at work, but we all need to learn from each other our different perspectives to understand that while our governments may be telling us one thing, we need to understand what the people are feeling. And maybe some of our team members in these other countries, in Mexico, Venezuela, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, China, maybe their perspectives are significantly different than the government's, and maybe they can communicate over Zoom. Maybe they need to be very careful about what they say, but how else are we going to bring the world closer together if we don't talk about it sometimes?
Yes, what I meant about discussing or talking about politics is not like an agenda, as you mentioned. Oh, we're going to discuss this, and 5 minutes later we're going to begin working. But it is to use empathy with the people which are living their own hell. We don't know what's happening over there. We don't know what's going on besides the discussions, besides the Slack messages, besides the emails. We don't know anything. And we have to use empathy as human with our team members who are living in those countries. I have good friends which live in Venezuela, and they live in their own hell. And I'm being empathetic to with them. It happens the same if I had a team member who were living in Venezuela, which I don't. But before, a few years ago, I had one engineer who was living in Nicaragua and was living in a poor county. And he was really good. He was receiving good money. But the problem was that he couldn't do something that you and I to do freely. And the things are, we have to understand that people make choices and they have to understand that their choices have consequences, that it could be positive ones or negative ones, but people do choices. And we, as human leaders, have to use our best tools, not only to communicate with them, not only to be empathetic with them, but to, hey, understand that their choices might be something that we might not understand, but we as leaders have to guide them in what our business, department is going on. So we have to split it, but we have to at least be empathetic, right?
Absolutely. That empathy in terms of listening to what they're experiencing, right? And we may make a request of them, well, we're going to be doing a go live soon, and we need, to be ready to do something at your local time, which happens to be midnight. Well, they can't safely travel to the office after 6 p.m. because we just don't understand. Let's say me as the American living in my suburbs, I can go anywhere at 3 in the morning and be totally safe. In
Mhm.
other parts of the world, no, when it gets dark out, it's not safe for the average citizen to travel, and we don't understand that. So we as humane leaders, with that listening with empathy, we need to be listening for signals that that we're making assumptions that their lives are like our lives, which is totally wrong. And we need to hear that I want to be a full member of this team, but if I can't do it remotely after 6 p.m., I just cannot participate because it's not safe for me to go to the office at 10 p.m. at night and come back home. I would have to stay there until 8 in the morning when it's safe to travel again. And me as the ignorant American, I need to realize I may be the leader, but I don't know what's going on at the ground. So listen with empathy. Do you see that they're nervous about this request? Then ask some questions that maybe they're going to be uncomfortable answering, but the reality may be that it may be very dangerous for them to do something that you're asking for. So you need to flex, humane leader, and you need to allow something else to happen there. Either they don't participate or they need to stay in their house and be available via Zoom. Maybe their network connection is not that great. I mean, I worked with team members that were in the office, they would have very, very good connections, but at home, their internet was very, very, terrible, basically unusable. Um, Look, that's a reality in a lot of the world. Starlink's changing a lot of that, but as a humane leader, be sympathetic to that and be aware that you may be wrong politically. Like, I don't understand what's going on in Venezuela in any kind of detail because my only awareness of it is the news, which is clearly very biased in certain directions, especially American news. So should I be in favor of what Trump's doing, with my global team? Should I be against it? Certainly, as I mentioned, like with the drug boats, I'm against parts of it, but I want something done. So be a humane leader. Don't assume that I'm correct. I guess the humane leader listens with empathy and also needs to go into any political discussion with the assumption, I am totally wrong. I totally don't understand the situation at all. You should go into any kind of political discussion about other countries with the assumption everything you've been told is wrong by the news, and you need to listen to your team to hear what's really happening at their level, because that's a reality that we as Americans certainly don't get.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you that bias is something that is going to be in both ways. And I mean, in the humane leader and with a team member. And what I mean, maybe a leader might say to a team member, well, your internet is slow, get a Starlink, but they might not be able to do it. And it might not be something related to money. It might be related to their own security. Set it up a Starlink antenna might be something to attract people in their home, in their vicinities of, oh, this guy has money, I'm going to mob him. Well, maybe as you mentioned before, security is something they had to cherish. So we cannot tell them as easily as maybe we had the same problem. Oh, our internet speed is going bad. I'm going to tell the ISP provider to increase the internet speed or set up a Starlink antenna. It's something that they might not be having, and that is one. And the second one, it is bias because we think differently from the people who are making their own choices based on not only their country, everything, their family, and many different factors that we might not know. So if they chose to do something or not to do something, is something that we must respect. That's why I mentioned bias. We had to avoid bias as we think that it is happening and try to do a lot of unbiased, but it's something that if we, it's like I mentioned before, we don't know the hell they're living until we live that hell. We will understand if those choices that were made by the people were correct or not. So it's something that we cannot fall into this bias.
Yes, and a humane leader, we are not perfect.
Oh.
right? And a really humane leader recognizes their weaknesses and their failure points. But we did get promoted to humane leader, or promoted to leader at least, by being right a lot, more often than wrong, right? That's how you become a leader. And so sometimes that ego gets in the way, and you start to think, well, I know what's going on. Again, stick with the Venezuela situation, right? Well, I'm a smart leader. I was promoted for being smart and right, so I'm going to be, I know what's going on in Venezuela. Unless you've been on the ground, and certainly the situation can be radically different in different locations within the country. Certainly my life in Tennessee is way different than my life was back in Chicago, Illinois. Still has crime, but it's totally different. Uh, had other problems and issues, with travel and things because of location. So be open-minded as the humane leader, listen with empathy, and just go into every conversation about these global politics type things with the mindset that you're wrong. I think that's better than I'm going to try and enter this as being unbiased, because I think our previous uh, uh, our previous coaching on being a humane leader was be aware of your biases. I think in these kinds of political discussions where it's very sensitive, you actually have to not try and be unbiased. You have to almost assume you're wrong, so that you will say, hey, I don't know anything about it. I'm going to get rid of my preconceived notions. What's going on in your life, Roberto? How do we work through this project that we're doing in the context of politically what's going on in your country, right? So there may be some certain things that we have to do this project in a certain way because of my ignorance of what's going on politically in your country. Like just using travel as the example, right? I cannot get into the office from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Let me give you this example. There are many developers who are really good, really, really good. And I don't mean in Venezuela, but I mean in Ukraine. When a few years ago Russia invaded Ukraine, what happened with those developers? Most of them, yeah, were working for Ukraine companies, but many of them were working for US companies. So what they did, they had to adjust their life. So they had to move from Ukraine to Poland, Ukraine to Georgia, Ukraine to another countries who weren't invaded, who didn't have the risk of being invaded, and they had to move. That is the same that it could happen to Venezuela, but it is not as easy as maybe as what you did. You moved from Illinois to Tennessee. It could be easy or to be difficult, but you moved. But maybe people in Venezuela doesn't have that luxury, but, and one of my good friends who's Venezuelan and he lives in Venezuela, his romantic partner was traveling to Germany to visit his sister when the United States decided to void all all airspace traveling to and from Venezuela. This lady stayed in Germany, and she's still been in Germany. She hasn't gone to Venezuela in 2 or 3 months. So she lives with her sister, and that is a benefit. But what about those people who were in vacations in other countries? Their money will be spent. They cannot be in a hotel all the time. They had to do something. So yes, it is really difficult. Imagine that one of our team members were living in Venezuela, were traveling to another country, and they couldn't go back, but they had to work. What could we do? We have also boundaries because hey, we're going to send you a new computer, a new Mac. Okay, where are you going to work? In a hotel? Are we going to give you more? That is something that has to be discussed with the leadership team. If the problem arises or the situation, excuse me, arises, because every single person, every single team member scenario is different.
Yes, completely agree. And I think, as I'm hopefully getting older and wiser, I'm realizing that the complexities of life, while we've got high-speed internet and all these kinds of things, it's actually making things more complicated. And the only way we're going to simplify them is through discussing them honestly and openly with more global people. So it doesn't help much for me to talk to my next door neighbor or when I'm vacationing, but within the US, talking only to US citizens. I have to be a global citizen, a global humane leader, and talk to my team globally. And if some political things come up, my previous answer of we don't discuss politics at work, I think I have to bend that, and I have to come up with good ways to have good, humane discussions if the topics come up, because we're all human, and the only way we're going to settle these political global problems is as more people get connected over Zoom and Skype and Link and all those kinds of things, that we realize we're all just on one planet. We need to get along better. And we, the people, need to be telling our governments we want to get along and solve these problems. Because, hey, I've got a friend, Roberto, in Mexico, and I can see that he's a reasonable leader. We can work these out. Let's meet some reasonable leaders in Venezuela and Ukraine and Russia and China and get these things worked out. I guess maybe a little philosophical for a humane leader call, but I think zero politics is no longer the right humane tenet, right? The foundation. No politics is the wrong answer. Some politics, I think, is necessary to make the world a better place.
Yes, and the change has to be uh, started by us, as you mentioned, we as human leaders, not only with our team members, not only discussing with the leadership team, but by ourselves. If we think narrowly and we are so rigid and we decided not to change based on what is happening to other people around the world, and those people are within our team, we're failing badly and miserably. We have to change. And we human leaders have this not only the opportunity, but the tools to change. If we change, uh, something good is going to happen in the
Agreed.
long run.
Agreed.
Okay. Well, I think with this, we could end this episode, Chris, and I'll see you next week.
Absolutely. Happy New Year. Happy 2026.
To you too.